And welcome to Connect the Dots. A Wall Street Journal report says that Denmark's Vestas, a large wind turbine maker, built two new factories in Sriperumbudur, which is near Chennai, in 2021. Another company, Vestas, has also expanded in wind turbines. So that's a lot of manufacturing activity that's happening in this country at this time. One reason, of course, is China, or China plus one, as they call it. But the interesting thing is it's also electronics, which is seeing substantial investments, and most notably, of course, Apple. Now, India has gone from being 9% of the world's smartphone handsets manufactured to a projected 19% this year, according to Counterpoint Technology Market Research. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is that substantial numbers of investments are coming into this space, which is electronic manufacturing. A lot of this is happening because it's being driven out of China. But the question, of course, is that what can this lead to? Can this go to the larger electronics ecosystem? What does that electronics ecosystem mean? And most importantly, or the last dot, what does this mean to the economy as a whole in terms of the jobs created and the kind of jobs created potentially in future? And of course, what could be the threats? To talk about all of this, I'm joined by Neil Shah, Vice President of Research at Counterpoint Technology Market Research, the firm that was quoted in that Wall Street Journal I just referred to, which was about manufacturing as a whole. So let's try and understand where this is and where we're going. So Neil, thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. So let me first ask you about where we stand. And now we're going to be talking about electronics, if that's the general descriptor. And of course, we'll come to
Sure.
Apple and others in a moment. But what is the capacity or the potential today for India where we stand?
Since the Make in India movement started in 2015-16, the new government pushed for it. And since then, we have seen 99% of the smartphones, which contributes to majority of the consumer electronics in India, right, is manufactured in India now. Earlier, it started with just assembly, high-level assembly, which used to be called SKDs, semi-knockdown units. And then now it has moved to CKD, which is completely knocked down. So now even the bare PCBs are coming, and we are mounting all the chips and everything on the board. And we are going to a high-level manufacturing, which requires advanced machining and everything. So because of that, what has happened, we are seeing a huge ecosystem being developed around these different suppliers, which have come from either Taiwan, China, or even there are some homegrown EMS players, which we have. So it's mostly about government pushing with the Make in India movement with different policies. It started with import duties on different products, which had led to started assembling in India. And then future, it moved to more of PLI schemes, which has enabled a lot of different manufacturers to expand their capacity beyond what they were doing before.
Right. So now, if you were to draw out that whole supply chain, so if we go back, let's say to 2000, maybe 17, where let's say
Yeah.
Apple, for example, started scaling up. What would have come first, and then what would have come later? I mean, I'm assuming like we've seen in the automotive industry, which is also very close to Sriperumbudur, where a lot of the electronic manufacturing is happening. So you started with CKD, went to SKD, and then of course, as the government also pushed, you increase the levels of localization.
Correct.
And obviously, if increasing levels of localization means all that manufacture has to happen somewhere around you. So tell us about the path here.
So the path is obviously, even if you scale back to before, right, in 2007, 2008, 2009, Nokia, when it was at peak, which Apple is right now or Samsung is right now, they used to do complete manufacturing. They had a complete ecosystem manufacturing mobile phones, right from components perspective, everything around China, on the same facility which you're talking about in Tamil Nadu. And they used to export a lot of phones. But since Nokia gone down and there's a huge vacuum left, and we did not have any manufacturing, and then we had Samsung, local brands like Micromax and others started manufacturing in India. Samsung has always been manufacturing in India. And then came Apple. So Apple is the one who leads by example in the industry because it has the highest level of manufacturing expertise which requires, right? So Apple started manufacturing in India in 2017 onwards to avail the benefits of saving on import duties, right? So Apple started with a couple of suppliers, maybe Foxconn, Wistron, and then expanded to Pegatron as well in future. But it was mostly SKD. So if you look at Apple is very sophisticated when it comes to manufacturing. It requires a complete ecosystem. It has a very diverse set of suppliers, very customized components which are manufactured for Apple. So it needs a very strong ecosystem. So it was very difficult for Apple to manufacture in India before because it did not have that ecosystem around the factories. It was just doing high level assembly like we do with IKEA furniture, right? So since then, Apple has been constantly trying to expand its ecosystem around. And what we have seen now, Apple is with what has happened in China last year and all the US and China tension, Apple wants to diversify beyond China. And that is where we are seeing a lot of ecosystem suppliers coming around the Apple
Right.
manufacturing.
Right, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. So let me stick to the first dot. If I could now ask you to give us some numbers. So, when we talked about going from 9 to 19%, what does this mean of global smartphone capacity, which sounds pretty huge? What
Yeah.
does this mean in terms of actual numbers?
So if you look at close to 1.25 billion smartphones were shipped, new smartphones were shipped globally last year, 2022. And end of 2022, almost 16% of those were manufactured in India, right? And India is also a big market
Right.
in terms of smartphone consumption. Almost 150 million smartphones were consumed locally, and rest was exported outside of India, right? And that ramped up in second half because of the China shutdown and zero lockdown policies. So that is the scale of it, and we are seeing that to increase from 16% to 19% by end of this year, and will further drive more inflection point as you see India becoming a major export hub.
Right. So just to revisit that number again, to at the end of this year, do you expect the same number, about 1.2 billion units globally?
Yeah, the market should be flat because still the market is not growing that fast. Only the premium market is growing, but the lower bottom of
Right.
the market is still struggling because of the high inflation and macroeconomic situation everywhere. So we'll see the overall market remain flat, but the amount of phones being manufactured in India will increase, which will go to close to 19% or even 20%.
So, and at 20%, what would the absolute number be as per your current estimate?
So it's close to 250 million units. That's 20% of 1.2
Right.
billion.
Of which, how many would be consumed domestically?
Close to 155, 160 million this year. So it's close to 90 million units which will be
Right.
exported.
Okay. Right. So now, but what is the size of the Indian market?
It's close to 160 million, 150 to 160 million units per year.
But you're saying that almost all of India's consumption is addressed by local manufacture?
Correct.
Okay. So it's only, if at all we are importing, it's only at the very highest end.
Yeah, importing by it is very small. It's less than 1% now, the full imports.
Okay. So then we don't import anything from China anymore.
No.
Is that correct?
No.
In this area?
No, we do not. It's only like during the launch, you need first set of shipments, like a few thousand units. Those are important. Then starts manufacturing here. So it's less than like 1%, or depending on some months it will be 2%. But overall, at full year, it's 1% or less than 1%. The complete CBU units.
Right. So to make 250 million phones or instruments, what does it take? I mean, one is obviously there's a mother plant which is putting everything together. What
Yeah, so
else?
there is a lot of things here, a lot of moving parts, and it requires. So if you look at the manufacturing ecosystem, it has first the design part, which is called IDH, independent design houses, and then you have ODM, which designs and manufactures both, and then you have EMS like Foxconn, who just manufactures. Apple designs everything, and Apple just gives a design, and they manufacture it. These are like three layers of manufacturing layers which should be there, and around those there should be a lot of different component manufacturers like module makers, camera module makers, display module makers, and then you have chipset suppliers, right? Obviously, we don't manufacture chipsets in India. We have to import those from Taiwan. The TSMC is the biggest, and Samsung are the biggest fabs, which are manufacturing 95% of the global smartphone chipsets, like Snapdragon processors and so forth. But rest and memory as well. But rest others, we are trying to set up plants here and to manufacture here, like PCBs or even mechanical components, the frames, and everything else which goes into a phone.
And this capability has to be imported and then localized through joint ventures and so on, or
Exactly. So it's both. Sometimes we have some indigenous players as well, which are coming up with technologies which are scaling now with more revenue and more influx of capital. But then it's mostly joint venture, as you said. That's either Chinese supplier or Taiwanese or Japanese supplier or a Korean supplier comes in, forms a joint venture, and then scales the operation, because they also don't want to miss out this boat uh, of getting into India market, which is the hottest.
Right. Right, and which brings me to somewhat the second dot as we connect the dots. Now, 250 million phones at this point, total number of instruments globally 1.2 billion. You're saying that the larger number or the top number is likely to be flat, at least for the next year or two, because of all other economic reasons. But India's contribution in this could increase, or could it face resistance from other manufacturers?
I don't think it will face resistance, because there are two other markets where phones are being manufactured, like Brazil and Vietnam, right? So Vietnam already you have Samsung and a little bit of LG and a little bit of Foxconn manufacturing there, but most of the Apple is diversifying from to India, and also a lot of other manufacturers like Oppo, Vivo, and others are also manufacturing in India, and even Samsung is manufacturing in India. If you remember, they launched the biggest plant in India, right? And they're exporting from India as well to other markets. So India will remain the destination because the entire ecosystem is developing here. Vietnam will see also growing, but for other products like AirPods and so forth, and iPads or MacBooks.
So would you, not to pin you down completely, but what's the global pecking order in terms of manufacturing capacity right now?
So it should be China, India, Vietnam, Brazil, Indonesia, Argentina.
Okay, and if we are at 250, what would Brazil and Vietnam be at roughly?
It should be very low, because Brazil is mostly for local consumption. It should be, I would say, less than 100 million units. Vietnam should be between 100 and 250 million units. Depends on the demand and depends on which models are being manufactured in Samsung plants. Which sometimes what happens, some models are shifted to India plant. So it depends on the demand for Samsung models across.
But you're saying Vietnam has similar capacity at this point of time as India?
Oh no, it's lower. It's between Brazil and India, basically. So it should be close to 100 and 120 million units.
Bit for Vietnam but you're saying Brazil is higher than Vietnam, right?
Brazil is lower than 100 million units.
Lower than 100 million. Okay. Now, if you were to look ahead now, what could this 250 million go to in the next couple of years?
So if you look at the overall capacity right now, what we have, including feature phones. So we did not talk about feature phones. We are just focused on smartphones. So India manufactures also 50 million feature phones on top of those 250 million, what we are talking about, right? So if you look at in terms of the overall capacity, India has close to 600 million. India can manufacture 600 million phones right now.
Okay. Which would mean half the world's capacity?
Yes, it can. Yeah, it has capacity. Only thing is how different manufacturers divide the orders. Yeah, across.
So you're saying 600 as things stand, or 600 given some investment into physical plants and more downstream or upstream manufacturing?
No, so in terms of real capacity, if you see a number of lines Samsung has, number of lines Foxconn has or Flextronics has in India, we have close to 600 million capacity to assemble or manufacture phones in India. But we are not fully using it right now, obviously. But as we get more ecosystem development and demand, we'll scale.
Right. So now let me focus a little bit on that 90 million which we export. Now, how easy is it? It's a very simple question, I guess, at one level, to export from India versus, let's say, an ability of a Vietnam or a Brazil to export, which Vietnam, of course, surely does.
Right. I think it's not the question of ease per se at this point. It's more of the benefits which all these EMS manufacturers wants to avail, the production link incentive. So more they produce here, the more incentives they get, right? So that is more of a advantage for us for India to ship more from India rather than from Vietnam at this point.
Okay, because it's the same manufacturers who are taking this call.
Mostly it's the same. If you look at like Samsung, Foxconn, but obviously India has more number of manufacturers here who are manufacturing as well. And even Apple has all the three partners here manufacturing.
Right. So, and tell us about what could mean for the electronics ecosystem. I mean, so we are making phones, but we've only been talking about phones, and obviously, Apple is not making MacBooks and iPads, if I understand correctly. Uh, could all of this lead to other things? I mean, which is beyond mobile phones, in your understanding?
Sure. So if you look at, there are two ways here. One is from the government side, regulation side. So government has been putting regulations on import duties on different products. For example, earbuds, smartwatches, right? Wearables, basically, laptops, even as well. So we'll see all these categories start taking the same path as smartphones from regulation push point of view. Second, everyone knows regulation is coming. So we are seeing already smartwatches and TWs being manufactured. The players like Boat, Noise, they're getting it manufactured locally, right? At the same time, players like Apple, it's when Apple starts manufacturing locally, everyone wants to follow the trend, right? Because Apple will attract all the top supply chain players over here in India as well, which can be leveraged by other players as well, other brands. So we'll see a lot of different segments coming up, not only gear, but also we'll see network equipment gear for base stations. We'll see for routers. We are seeing already set-top box and a lot of fiber FTTH routers being assembled in India already, right? Like Geo, for example. Geo,
And you're saying this is linked to the same
yes,
ecosystem in many
yes,
ways.
because they will have common
Okay.
processor coming from MediaTek, Qualcomm. They will have memories coming from Micron, Samsung. They will have resistors, capacitors coming from the same suppliers, right? So overall, I think 60 to 70% of the suppliers remain common across all electronics products, right? And we have started manufacturing smart TVs as well over here, right? So it's because of that push, initial push of smartphones, we have the entire ecosystem manufacturing a lot of different electronics products. So this is the first part, right? To your question. Second part is semiconductors. So government has also started semiconductor PLI scheme because they understand just manufacturing and assembling is not the solution. We should have fabs also here manufacturing chipsets that completes the entire supply chain, right? So you don't have to source chips from Taiwan or China or even Korea, right? So the next step, which government is working on, attracting all these different semiconductor fabs and companies, memory companies like Micron, Samsung, Toshiba, and so forth, to manufacture here. At least start low-level manufacturing here of packaging the chips, not if manufacturing the wafers out of the fabs. So we'll see that as the next big movement, and that will complete the entire picture of manufacturing here, and will lead to a very robust supply chain like even China does not have right now, because China does not have chipset manufacturing.
Right. Right, and that's going to be a tough one because I mean, for
Yeah,
example, Vedanta has talked about its
fab.
own, chip manufacturing plant in Gujarat. I mean, I do know that, or I've heard
That's
that
easy.
it's not going to be as easy to get off the ground as they thought it would be, and that's fine. But what you're saying is that the related ecosystem, where you're saying almost 60% of components are common, thanks to the wonder of electronics, is triggering a much larger manufacturing electronics ecosystem than perhaps at least most normal people would have
Correct.
thought about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Right. And as an extension to that now, so if let's say, for example, $1 billion have been announced in investment so far, and that's gone into the ground. Another $700 million was announced to for a plant in near Devanahalli in Devanahalli near Bangalore. For another, iPhone manufacturing plant,
Yeah.
or not. I mean, not by Apple, but obviously by the supplier to Apple.
Yeah.
So, could you say, or could we say that we could see proportionately in equally large investments coming into these other components of electronics or other electronic components as well,
Yeah, it should
or would it
definitely.
be more alongside?
It should definitely, because everyone wants to have optimized supply chain. They don't want to depend, because if there's one component short, you cannot build a phone or you cannot build a product, right? So you need to have just-in-time type manufacturing and capability suppliers around you as much as possible. You want to minimize that risk because it's millions or billions of dollars every day Apple generates from selling their products, right? So you see it's a more of a network effect as you get one big player coming in, building the ecosystem around it, and all the component suppliers want to come in. And once they come in, they also want to scale further. So they go and sell their technology and capability to other brands in other
So, very
markets.
back of the envelope kind of numbers, if I may ask you here. So, let's say Apple or Samsung invested $1 billion in putting up a plant to make phones. Now they want to make, let's say, use all this sort of collateral technology to make either a smart TV or or a laptop or a notebook or so on. What would the investments be? I mean, proportionately.
So it's technically, if you look at someone like Samsung would invest by themselves, but Apple won't directly invest because it will do it through suppliers. The supplier ecosystem will have to invest. So if it depends on different capacities and what products you want to manufacture. So I would say with respect to components, so if you start from the chips, like fabs takes multiples of billions of dollars, right? Then you come to that is a chipset fab. Then you come to display fab, which is slightly lower. It's single-digit billion dollars. And then you come to camera modules. You come to housing assemblies. You come to other chips, other small components, which are hundreds of millions of dollars of investments. So that is how it scales across different components.
Right. And I'm sure it's not easy to put numbers because obviously we have to see these investments coming into the country and as they will.
Sure.
Yeah. So let me come to the third dot now. Let's try and link this to what you're seeing in terms of economic impact. Obviously, there is economic impact, and particularly in the regions where these plants have come up. But if you were to look back a couple of years, maybe 4 or 5 years, and look ahead,
Yeah.
how are you adding everything up?
So what our research has shown is since the Make in India started, our local value addition was a low single digit, like 4 to 5%. But since then, fast forward right now, we are close to 17% of local value addition. Whereas China, if you look at for benchmark, has 40 to 45% local value addition of total manufacturing, right? Of the total components or total product ASP, I would say. With respect to economy, obviously it drives a lot of jobs, which is the easiest metric you can see with all these different 600 million capacity plants, right? They require engineers, they require all the labor from different level, from security to management, right? So it obviously generates a lot of jobs, a lot of skills. And for skilling,
Is there a metric there, Neil? Is there a metric, like, for example, if you say for every million you put into this industry as a whole, this is the kind of, or these are the number of jobs you could potentially create?
it's hard to put on that because again,
Okay.
we have done that study, but nothing on top of my mind yet. But it should be
Okay.
on an average for a plant which manufactures like Foxconn, for example, right? If it manufactures close to 6 million units per month, right? 6 to 7 million units per month. I think it will have at least tens of thousands of employees. Yeah.
People
So
working there. Right. Yeah, and including for the Bangalore project or the investment, it was mentioned that it would create almost 100,000 jobs for, yeah. So, yeah, but I can
no.
understand that there won't be any one-to-one relationship, but it would be close. So, and your sense is that if we are lucky enough and we can keep adding to this electronics ecosystem, how big could this be in terms of jobs now? I mean, the economic impact is obvious if and that's also assumes obviously that the value add is increasing. But
Yeah.
what kind of jobs do we see?
I think from jobs perspective, I think the most important part here is not the quantity, but the quality of the labor, right? India has the highest percentage of skilled labor when it comes to software, right? But on hardware, we haven't. So we have to first digitally skill these different players, different, I would say, future employees, which will work in these different factories, will design products. So what we have been focusing right now on manufacturing, right? But we have to move from manufacturing to creation of IP, intellectual property. And that is where we see a lot of these different bodies like ESA, for example, Indian Electronic Semiconductor Association. They're partnering with different universities like IITs and even regional to skill all this and put it into curriculum on how to design a semiconductor, how to manufacture, and we can create future fabs, which will generate hundreds of thousands of jobs, right? Because those are high scale and going to so many electronics, right? So it is like more of a pyramid where you have 2 or 3 fabs, but they're creating a lot of jobs for the entire different electronics. So I think quality is important.
And last couple of questions, Neil. So, when you talk about all these, I'm assuming engineers who could potentially work in the electronics ecosystem as opposed to working in the IT ecosystem, are these people who are ready? Because firstly, they've all taken mostly computer science or so on, or could they be retrained, or what does that market look like to you right now?
Yeah, I think we have a good percentage of electrical and electronics engineers, but they end up going to IT because that's where
Hmm.
the jobs are, that's where the money is. And as someone like Mark and Jason said, software is eating the world. So everything is software. Even building a chip, 70% is software actually. 30% is actually just churning out the chip within the silicon wafer, right? Which is done by machines. So that is where I think even electronics, electrical engineers can easily go into electronics manufacturing ecosystem. So it's not should be not be that difficult, but still it needs to be have some amount of training to think from IP creation rather than just manufacturing.
Right, but you're saying that this, I mean, I'm trying to position this, or at least ask you if this could be positioned as an opportunity,
Yeah,
that this is something that you can take up as a career
absolutely.
or focus on instead of saying, okay, I'm only going to go and join Infosys or Wipro.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, actually. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I misunderstood your question. But yeah, absolutely. I would say that will be an alternative career right now. And if you look at a lot of those low scale engineers, which were like 12th grade, then join ITI type institutes and going into low level manufacturing, now they will see a higher level of upskilling within these universities, and there'll be specialized diploma program for this sector, and you will see them going into electronics as well as semiconductor manufacturing.
Right. Okay. Last question, Neil. Just to bring it all back. I mean, we talked about connecting the dots between what's happened in China first and the China Plus One, and how the opportunity flowed here, and how we can build on it, expand the electronics ecosystem, make it truly impenetrable in a way, and of course, create jobs and economic impact. Now, all of this was also there in China, and
Correct.
then suddenly, for various reasons, it's China started losing that advantage for geopolitical reasons, economic reasons, COVID, and so on and so forth. Now, we also have to ensure that it doesn't slip away from us, even as we
Correct.
build this. So, what do we need to
I
do?
think the most attractive part for India is India has an English speaking population, right? That is one big advantage. It's
Right.
young population, which China does not have both, right? Nor the other companies, nor the other countries except for US has both, even right in terms of English speaking. Third, we have a big, huge engineering talent, which no one else has in the world, right? So from all these three, and the fourth is the cost of the labor is cheaper. It's almost one third of China now, right? China has become super expensive, and it is becoming expensive for manufacturing as well, and there is shortage of skilled labor. So all these four works in our advantage, and since our population has been growing and we are overtaking China now, so I would say we still have a huge next. We can have a lead for at least next 20 to 30 years if we continue scaling this huge middle class and huge young population we have, right? So those are the advantages we have. The only thing which I said is how we can go to the next level by designing products in India, which China has done really well.
Right. And that's
So I think design is the most
right,
important
and
part.
that's a challenge and an opportunity that we have to be very careful. We
Exactly.
have to watch very carefully. Neil Shah, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me, and I do hope to come
Thank you
back to
so
you
much for
soon.
having me.
And we'll talk about chip manufacturing, which is deserves a separate discussion. And I do hope to do that with you
Exactly.
soon. Thank you so much.